So thank you everyone for joining our panel discussion on building AI from development to deployment. I'm Elio, so I will be moderating the panel. What we will do is we'll start with a round of introductions, and then we'll have a discussion on some topics around AI models in production. I will start by introducing myself. So I'm a data scientist at Trivago, which is a meta search platform for accommodations. My background is in computer science, and I worked in research before joining Trivago. So that's about me in a nutshell. What I will tell you in addition to that, and I will also ask our panelists to tell and to share with us, is a little bit about my team and other teams in the company that are essential to putting models into production. So I work in the kind of B2B side of the company, and we work in cross-functional teams. So typically our teams are a mix of data scientists, data analysts, data engineers, software developers, and operations people. Kind of the specific composition will depend on the specific types of products. And then we have a big data platform team that then is the team that does the grunt of operations work and helps us kind of sort out issues running the models live or running our big batch jobs and things like that. So that's that's essentially the setup we have. So then I would move on to Maria. I think you need to unmute yourself, perhaps.
There we go. My name is Maria Eres. I'm a principal data scientist with Home Depot, which is the largest home improvement retailer in North America. And I'm with online department, Home Depot Online, HomeDepot.com, which I believe we are probably number 5 or number 6 largest e-commerce in terms of traffic in North America as well. My focus is in large-scale personalized recommendation to help the customer find the product that they need, and sometimes be able to finish the project that they start with, which often people who come to Home Depot, home improvement, sometimes it's a single item, but often it is a project, and sometimes they actually don't know that these are things that they need or what they are getting into. So it's a journey of the customer, and that we try to help the customer with. And we have largely 2 very distinguished, very unique customer, end customer like you and me, right? And also the pro customer who are smaller set, but are very key and very influential within Home Depot. And 2 of them are very at a high level, large customer segment, and they are very, very different in terms of what they know, what they do, how they like to shop, what they want to see on the website, and so on. So that's so in a nutshell, we do recommendation and also inspiration, recommendation, and so on.
Cool, thank you very much. Can we move on maybe to Shamir?
Yeah, I am the director of R&D for 7-Eleven. So I lead what is typically our leading edge technology research. So previously we've launched our cashierless store at our headquarters. So a lot of it is computer vision, and there is some work that we've done on voice, as well as improving search. But basically looking at taking and merging techniques from machine learning and research and applying them to real world problems to solve retail problems. And so we have a department of about 40 or so engineers, and focus on a number of capabilities throughout that. But previous projects have included hardware, computer vision, embedded computing, and basically distributed computing to make that full cachierless store work.
Cool, thank you. Shall we move to Mari?
Sure, I'm happy to go next. So hi, great to be here. I'm Mari Yoller. I'm founder and CEO of Snackable AI. So a few words about me. I have been in the audio meets content meets AI space for the last 7 years. Snackable is my second company in that space. I'm originally from Estonia, living in New York, and I'm splitting my time between those two because our team is split between those two locations. So Snackable is a solution for creators and marketers to drive content engagement, and specifically work with spoken word, audio and video, meaning podcasts, webinars, events like this, and so on. And so what we do is that we leverage AI, specifically machine learning, natural language processing, to basically bring structure and data into long form recordings and extract value for marketers from that. So we break the content down into logical chapters, extract highlights that are good for sharing, metadata that improve search and SEO, and transcripts for team collaboration. The reason why we're doing this now, of course, there's been an absolute explosion in spoken word, audio and video, especially since the pandemic. So as part of the marketing mix, audio and video engagement has become increasingly important, and that all requires smart packaging, which we do with AI. And that can have significant improvements to engagement, upwards of 30% of what we've seen. About our team, so we're cross-continental. Our AI team is actually based in Tallinn, Estonia. So of the 15-person team that we have, 10 are engineers, and out of those 4 are specifically in machine learning and natural language processing. Perhaps an interesting fact of how we got started. So I think we're a little bit unique in this panel because I represent the startup world. We got started in Estonia actually by collaborating with our 2 top universities. And what that did for us is really gave us 3 benefits. Number 1 is that we were really able to leverage the brain power and the networks of those universities. Second was that we had incredible kind of inflow of talent from that. It really helped us set up our machine learning team. And thirdly, it has really jump-started our business. So we are really able to accelerate all the development because of the know-how that we gained.
Cool, thank you very much. And then finally, Victor.
Yeah, thank you, Elia. Hi, my name is Victor, and I work as a data science lead for Nectar360, which is a company that belongs to Sainsbury's. It's one of the biggest supermarket chains in the UK. So for those who don't know, Nectar360 owns the Nectar loyalty scheme, which is a loyalty scheme where you can earn points by shopping with one of our partners, and then you can also spend these points with some of our partners to get discounts. We do have many partners, but just to mention a few of them, Sainsbury's, obviously, Argos, eBay, Esso, Brakes, and British Airways, among others. As you can imagine, we do have a quite rich data set with all these partners. So I started at Nectar about 2 years ago, and the idea was to start building the data science team there. When I joined it, there was a data scientist that started a couple of months before myself. And at the moment, we are 3 data scientists plus a data engineer, and we also have 3 developers that are part of the bigger team. So that would be the core team. We are called Tools and Data Science, and as the name says, we are involved mainly in building tools for the business, but we also work obviously in personalization and targeting. And because we work with all the business, we are involved in projects with almost all the different teams here, like insights and analytics, marketing, market research, offer management teams, etc. We also strongly collaborate with data services, our data engineers, DevOps at Nectar, but also at Sainsbury's, and these will depend on the project we are working on. So as I said, we started the team from the beginning. There was nothing ready for us. We had to build everything from scratch. There was no machine learning ops, no environments, nothing in there. And actually, we are still working on this. We are in the middle of the process. So hopefully, I'm going to be able to share some interesting information, or that's what I hope.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much. So then maybe kind of, I mean, lots of things we can talk about. We had kind of a pre-selection of topics. One thing that kind of was common in what we discussed was kind of how is this interaction between the AI or data science teams and the kind of the business stakeholders of the products developed by these teams. And so I would maybe start with Mari to give us maybe more the business perspective there on how that collaboration works and challenges there.
Yeah. So our business at Snackable is fundamentally enabled by machine learning. So it's core to us. Like if we don't have machine learning outputs, we don't have a product, because essentially we take machine learning to extract, structure and insight from long form spoken word content. So it is actually a significant challenge, because as you know, the cycles on which machine learning operates are not those of the standard software engineering. So making machine learning kind of really efficiently input into the software engineering to actually integrate that into the product, and then also have a conduit to product design and product management has been something that we've been refining over time. So we've done a couple of, I think doing that is really key. And we've realized also that we need to take the machine learning team and bring them much kind of further upstream into kind of like the business and strategy conversations. So it's really clear, like, what are we building? Like, what problem are we trying to solve? What is the impact on the customer value? How does it actually manifest in the product? Because it makes their job just infinitely easier. And it's also about the expectations management from that, because as you know, there is a lot of experimentation. Not every experiment is going to be successful. Managing those expectations between the stakeholders is really key, especially all the way down to the sales who are selling, our solution to customers and saying, okay, this is coming. And then we know that the machine learning team is all the way up front, and they're really driving the development, like all the kind of experimentation, modeling, developing, running those models, and actually creating those pushing that into production and making that into products. So it's like this whole sausage factory in between that is not visible to the outside eye, right? So we've done a couple of things. I mentioned bringing the machine learning team into the mix a lot earlier. So they're part of the strategy conversation. They're part of the product design discussions. They're really clear about what we're trying to do. Also helps break down the work. So, there's always this desire, and it's really respectable. It's like, I want to just do the best thing. Like this model I'm going to output is going to be amazing. It's going to have F score of 99% and all these great things. But there is, also value in iteration, especially about what the market demands now and what all the great things that we can do. And so how do we step that out into the future that we can actually have milestones that are more achievable that we can break down? And the last thing I would say is that we've actually also started more time boxing machine learning work. So our software engineering runs on 2-week sprints, but because our ML is so core to our product, we've actually started to kind of gently nudge the ML team also into this 2-week sprints. And it's not the same as delivering a piece of software. It's about time boxing your experiments. So I think that we've actually found really helpful, and the machine learning team likes that as well. And that's really helped us to kind of get to product, get to decisions, and also figure out if we're going down the wrong path much earlier than before.
I think that
super interesting.
Yeah, that perspective is. Yeah, I found a very similar experience even at an enterprise scale, right? I mean, we're not operating. We have to operate in many ways like a startup because we're getting funding from other departments to solve problems for them. But you're right in that having the advocate who understands machine learning and the process of what's actually possible early on really helps leadership say, you know what, before we even go down this path, how feasible is it and how much work will it actually take? Because I found before I was in this role, there were a lot of promises made, right? I feel like when there's not a strong foundation of understanding of what's possible with machine learning, with computer vision, the expectation is, well, you just take a bunch of features and if we have the right features, it'll work. Right. I've literally had conversations with some of our chief digital officer and chief information officer explaining why it's not that simple. And second, you're totally right about the sprint cycle. In developing more advanced computer vision models for, tracking people and product detection. What we found is breaking them down into chunks of like, hey, you're trying to accomplish this task was much easier than saying, I want you to build the whole end-to-end machine learning pipeline, right? So whereas one sprint, the researchers may be working on exploring all the various methods for object detection, another set of researchers are working on segmentation pipelines, saying once it's detected, how do we remove everything from it? And then another might be on classification. And so breaking that machine learning problem into chunks, I found was very helpful, even in communicating back to the business, saying, hey, this is what the original image was, and this is what you get out of it now after putting it through this box, right? But I'm interested to hear how others have gone through and helped advocate the value of machine learning while also helping people understand the limitations.
Yeah, I would like to add in terms of interplay between data science or AI with the business advocate. So within Home Depot, so we work with we have like largely 3 groups. We have an engineering team who would eventually productionalize our product. And product manager who represent the business side, and the data science who actually do the kind of somewhat prototype work, right? And I would say that we have tendency, probably like other companies as well, have tendency to start forming a team from technology perspective. For example, computer vision, we may have a team that do like computer vision, another team does a NLP, and so on, right? But if you move to the next level, at the usage level, lastly we have recommendation and search, right? Going back to computer vision, it belongs to both. You can recommend based on picture that look alike, or you can also do search based on picture look alike. And so you step this is within kind of somewhat engineering, how engineering was structured. But eventually, what really we try to achieve is what customers' problem we try to solve. Focus on the customer instead. And if you focus on the customer, like we do home improvement, and within the topic of, let's say, computer vision, how does that help the customer? And then we may come to conclusion that it helps customer who like doing more like home decor type projects, right? And if you are doing like fixing roof, or if you're going to buy a screwdriver, what does it look like? It doesn't matter as much. So focus on that. That might help shaping the team who actually build the computer vision and image detection, matching whether it's similar or not. Screwdriver, whether it's similar to not, actually people don't care that much. So don't spend that much time to get like accuracy, very accurate that this screwdriver are really similar, because that's not the customer problem. They're not gonna be able to like really a wow effect on that. But on home decor, you see a chandelier. This is a chandelier that the customer is looking at. Show other chandelier that's similar to that. That help the customer. So with that, then that going back to how data science team, the technology stack would work, eventually solve the customer problem. We try to organize the team around the customer problem, and starting from say decor, home decor, and then shape the technology stack or engineering stack kind of to address that. Otherwise, it used to be somebody said, I think it's very funny. It used to be that you look at Home Depot website and you see that it looks like an org chart. Like at the top left here is this team, at the corner here this is another team, right? But that shouldn't be. This is a page where see what the customer are trying to get of that and form the team around it.
Yeah, I think actually we started in a slightly different position. So when we started there, they told us, see what you can do, instead of coming with the problems already. These are the problems that we need to solve. It's like, okay, here you are, this is the business, see what you managed to do. So in our case, obviously you need to manage expectations. That's something that you need to do always, but it was easier because it was usually the data science team or our team going to the different teams, trying to understand what kind of issues they could have, and then say, oh, maybe we can build this tool for you, or we can improve this process. Obviously, once you convince them that you can do something for them, then you need to manage a little bit expectations. You first tell them that you can do marvelous things, and then you need to tell them, yeah, that this takes time. So we are going to start with a very simple product, see if that works for you, if this is a good direction, and then slowly we're going to keep improving it. But yeah, I think that's pretty much how we do it in our case. It's a business that was grown a little bit organically with different partners, and we do have different ways of working even in similar teams, but they work differently. So we need to agree all together to start standardizing some of the processes so we can start putting some of the machine learning on top of it.
Super interesting. I had a couple of follow-up questions on what you said. So regarding the kind of trying to fit machine learning work into 2-week sprints, which is also a kind of something we've been trying to do, and I think we're still improving on how to do it. How do you handle things like, you know, running A/B tests that may run for more than 2 weeks even?
So I can take that one. So of course, if you have, I mean, we look at machine learning projects also end to end. So trying to figure out, like, just ballpark upfront, saying, okay, we're going to spend this amount of time to figure out the best approach. Then we're going to have to spend perhaps this amount of time to do human annotations, or we're going to have to do, you know, some amount of time in terms of data cleaning. And so we kind of try to map that out. And within that, then we take that whole project, and then we break it down into 2-week sprints so that we have some way of calibrating where we're at. So if we're starting out with an experiment, then we get to the end of it, then we say, okay, that really wasn't successful. We actually have to recalibrate what we're doing. We can adjust the entire project as well. And then we know that perhaps there was, you know, we need to add 2 more weeks at the end of that project, but the cadence doesn't change. It's just a really good way for us to kind of have a regular cadence in the team. And you know, the machine learning team also feeling like they're more connected to the whole, you know, overall company, to their software engineering, to the product, to the business. And so we're able to kind of connect them more into kind of the overall, like, connective tissue of what's going on. It might mean that the work changes, but it still kind of stays in this kind of regular cadence.
One thing that's been very effective for us is when we communicate up and out, we talk through quarterly deliverables, right? Like larger milestones, saying, hey, this overall feature will be by this timeline. So that gives us flexibility to readjust within, you know, a couple of weeks of that timeline and flex back and forth. Because naturally, what we found is actually doing the research and getting the result sometimes doesn't fit into that 2-week cycle. Sometimes it's 2.5, 3, heck, 4 weeks, right? Like it can be much longer, and the problems often end up far more complex, especially from a data perspective. Because as I'm sure everyone here has seen, getting the data in the right state first is always the longest part of the problem, and you never really know whether the annotated data set you have is worth anything until you start trying to model it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to add to, sorry. So I wanted to add to A/B testing running long, right? You know, so when it doesn't get to statistical significance, you know, so when we try to, before we go to A/B testing, we try to do our homework. And so there's a process of offline evaluation, which is different from validation. And when you do the training and the validation, let's say we try to find similar product. You know, we train the model, we have label, and our validation may say how similar the product is, how there's a score of how confident you are that they're similar and so on. And you may say that your model is doing pretty good. But offline evaluation should be something that resembles the A/B testing. You know, regardless of what the score think these two products are similar, it's, you know, so confident or whatnot. Eventually, what we really care about it, we like recommendation. We put this recommendation in front of the customer, and they're gonna click that, or gonna what you care about, engagement or conversion, and they're gonna buy it or not. And offline evaluation, as much as possible, try to gauge that number, are they gonna buy or not. For example, we can have a imaginary, like, simulate the recommendation. You know that what the customer eventually buy. They didn't see it from our recommendation, but if they really need it, they'll find it, they'll buy somehow. So we can kind of gauge whether the thing that we are going to show, is it correct or not? Is it something the customer gonna buy? But based on that, that's what we call offline evaluation. We can get something relatively similar to A/B testing, which is a better index to look at than the, sometimes than the validation from your training, because training sometimes is trained on something else that is not related to how the customer would react to, what, the experience that we can present to them, right? But in summary, so, before we can go to A/B testing, find some index, some analysis that would closely represent what A/B testing going to be, and at least has some insurance that, this test has potential before you go to A/B testing. And if you do that, chances are that, A/B testing going to wrap up and you see significance faster than, other tests that will just keep dragging on.
Yeah, maybe I have not that much to say because we tried to do this 2 weeks sprint. We didn't succeed. But to be honest, I'm fine with it because I think our system also works. We obviously try to do kind of a sprint, and we try to put tasks that we know you're going to finish during the sprint. So I'm going to try this model and this model. Obviously, you may try this model and whatever during this couple of weeks or this sprint, and then they may not work. So it means that you have to keep working a little bit more. To be honest with you, I think we've been quite lucky, and our models end up working in a kind of relatively short period of time. So we never had to make this really difficult decision of deciding that we are going to stop this project because it's not going anywhere, and we have spent too much time.
That's very interesting. Another thing that I think everyone touched upon was the importance of having the ML AI teams close to the business units, right? And so you talked about the importance of explaining this to the business, but what about from the perspective of the teams and of the technical people? How do they feel or what has been your experience in kind of, dragging them into some of these meetings with designers or product managers or whatever?
For me, it's been actually really beneficial. What's interesting is bringing in a machine learning engineer and helping them understand the customer perspective often brings out insights that weren't there before. There's a project we're doing with planogram detection, right? So in retail, you have a map of how products fit on a shelf. And one of the challenges is, how do you do compliance? How do you make sure that people are actually arranging the products correctly? Because there's a lot of research that goes into saying this is the right arrangement that will maximize sales. And so what we were trying to solve was, how can we allow our associates to just use a cell phone and computer vision to say this is the right lineup and reference the product itself. But one of the fundamental questions that came up is, even if you build an app for the associate, why would they use it? Like, if they're not complying with a planogram anyway, what is the point? So the more fundamental problem that first needed to be solved was, how do you get people to actually follow and use the system to begin with before spending a ton of time to build the system, right? You may have the best system in the world, but if it's not used, it doesn't matter. So actually that prevented us from jumping onto a whole line of work that would have been quite extensive until that part was figured out first.
I think on our case, as I mentioned, we started with a white page, and we needed to find ourselves inside the business. But I think the data scientists and even the engineer that are on our team, they are very used to talk to many different people. Luckily, in our business, it's a data business, so you can talk about data with marketing, so you have no issue with that. But I think it's really important that you have data scientists that can easily understand what's the business problem. Because if you don't have a data scientist that is capable to do that, then I think it's going to be very difficult, right? As I was saying, our engineer, the one that we have on our team, it's kind of a mixture of different skills, and he's a little bit of a data scientist too, and he's able to go into these meetings and understand what's happening there. So that's great. But it's true that maybe if we go for more pure engineers or DevOps, then we are the ones that we are dealing with them and trying to, to deal between maybe the business requirements and and the more tech people.
For us, it's also been very beneficial. And I think from the machine learning team, it also has been very useful for them, and something that people like doing is of course, there's a balance in terms of, letting people do the work that they're hired to do and that they love doing, and also giving them enough transparency and visibility into the business. So everybody has a same mission about what we're building, who we're building that for, and why. So we've actually, we're fortunate to have a team that quite enjoys actually also going in front of a customer every so often. And we use this kind of like a really trump card. I think it builds a lot of credibility as well when you're kind of bringing out somebody who's really core to building this kind of magical product that you see. So that's been fantastic. I think the other thing that we found is really key is to have product management cover both software engineering and machine learning, because that integration and integration point is so critical. And if you don't have visibility across, it sometimes creates a lot of problems in terms of delays, misunderstandings, just not being fully connected. So we found that having product kind of cover the whole spectrum is really important.
On that note, how do you balance, I mean, one of the challenges we've had, especially with deeply technical products, right, is in my role, I was basically serving as a pseudo product manager and tech lead at the same time with our Cassiola store, because the roadmap was just so complex that a product manager without a strong technical machine learning background could never give a solid estimation of time or even what the right features or problems to work on were. So how do you balance the technical background of the person while also allowing them to focus on the business side, or do you let people with no technical background also be the product managers for those roles?
We don't. For us, it just makes no sense. We also realize that you don't have to have a data science PhD to be an effective product manager, but you have to have both a solid understanding of how ML works, and you really have to have a passion for that. So in our interviews, we always ask people who come in product management interviews, we say, what's the thing in ML, NLP that you're really excited about? And if the answer is not, that if that doesn't really make people's eyes sparkle, then we realize that that's probably not the right fit for us. But then, finding somebody who has very good, solid, like business understanding as well, I think that's the magic bullet, right?
We found them to be unicorns for the most part, right? It's really, really hard to find people who have a strong business fundamental understanding as well as the sufficient technical background to be able to lead teams.
And I think it's a little bit also, sorry, I was just going to respond to that really quickly. I think it goes both ways. It's also about, actually really helping your machine learning team also help the product management, how to talk to those people, kind of how to connect the dots, like how to, ask for what they need. So the learning goes in both directions. I think that's pretty important too.
Yeah, we've had a lot of success coaching very technical people into being better communicators, and that's led to a lot of great results.
Yeah, my question was exactly going in that direction. So for technical people, is that something that I mean, you can train them, but is that something that you try to spot already during the recruiting stage for your teams?
For me, I love a balance of someone who's a very good problem solver. I think for a fresh college graduate, I almost don't even care if they have a PhD or an extensive background in machine learning, first and foremost, but rather a hunger for knowledge and learning, right? And if they can demonstrate an ability to solve interesting problems, the field moves so quickly that they have to read up all the time anyway. Your specific thesis may be irrelevant in 3 to 5 years, right? Unless you've kept up reading. So that's one aspect. The other is communication. I found that if they're strong communicators and if they're willing to listen and how well they listen, they're usually pretty coachable. So even if they're not perfect in terms of communicating with other team members from day one, if they can take that feedback and learn from it, I think that's more important than anything else. So I guess intellectual curiosity and communication are the two biggest things I look for in new candidates.
Does anyone want to share any tips and tricks on recruiting for data ML teams?
I would basically agree with you with what you just said. it's really difficult to find unicorns. But in our case, we also work, you may have someone in the team that is stronger with communication and someone that is maybe more technical. So you try to adapt a little bit the projects that you are giving them. If you know that there's going to be a strong communication between different teams, maybe you put the 2 data scientists together, and the one that is a better communicator is going to be dealing with this situation, and the technical one is going to be doing maybe a little bit more of the models, right? So you don't need to have everything in one person, because it's really difficult to find that, I would say. But you can mix them. I'm pretty sure that you can find a good mixture inside your team.
Cool.
I mean, we're a startup, so perhaps we look for slightly different things. I mean, for us, time is everything. It moves so quickly. So I agree with Shamir about looking for intellectual curiosity, looking for people who are problem solvers, looking for people who are very good communicators. And for us, it's, what we do is that when we have any candidate coming in, whether it's for product management, whether it's for data science, or even for software engineering, they meet the cross-functional team. So our interview process is actually very intense. And candidates really love it, because they really feel like they get to know the team. They get to know the team dynamics. We get to know them. So it's really easy to jump in after that. But so, yeah, for us, it's really critical to, even for the machine learning engineers, to kind of really understand, are there somebody who's going to really want to kind of be left alone? They're going to want to work on this problem. They're going to be a little bit more academic oriented. They're going to try to come up with something on their own, or they're going to be someone a bit more pragmatic, who's going to say, okay, this customer problem like really makes my eyes sparkle. I'm going to, find the best and kind of fastest time to market to make that work. So we're too small to be able to have folks who are going to be more sort of research oriented. I think that's a better fit for larger organizations where that research kind of cadence is different from software development. But yeah, for us, it's about this intellectual curiosity, communication, and problem solving.
Maria, I think you're on mute.
So I was about to say, we are a very big company, so we don't always need somebody to be able to fill in multiple roles. So I noticed that candidates in the field, right? There are people who come from analytic background, and they'll do data profiling. They will create, we do a case study. Right? In that case study, they will say, look at data distribution and so on, and before they get into the model and so on. And their model may be good or not good. That's a separate conversation. But there are also a type of candidates who will come in like deep learning, very black box. Their model may be really good, but they don't really pay attention into like what's the distribution, or what gets into it, what's the intuition behind it. But what they care about is my model is doing really awesome. So back to, do we pick one? The other one is good. One is good better than the other. I think depends on what you want that person to work for. And I understand, like, for a small company, you might not be afford to pick both of them. But for us, I think there are roles where to identify two chandeliers that are very similar. For example, you don't have to explain how you do that. We look at the result. You show me, your model really picks chandelier that looks similar. We are happy with your work. And you don't have to go through data profiling or intuition behind your models. But there'll be some other case where I guess things are more closer to customer activities, to identify DIY customers, for example. It may be possible that we do black box, purely black box. How you end up there, it doesn't matter. But often, DIY customer needs definition. Nobody come to Home Depot and raise their hand and say, I am DIY. You have to define it. That people, they bought this and that, and they come every week. That's why they are DIY and so on. So there needs to be intuition into what they are doing. So in that type of role, that type of project, then you need somebody who, you need to be able to provide data. You need to be good at SQL and so on. So back to to the risk of being to overgeneralize. I think there are machine learning practitioners who kind of focus on outcome and not so much on the explainable aspect of it. And they are good. They have there are good projects that can really benefit from their skill. And there are some projects that need somebody who has more of the broad kind of business skill, be able to pitch the idea to the to the business, saying why we want to do this, why we need to identify the right customer, and so on. And then they need to be able to like good at communications and have business intuition, and also good at modeling and different requirements.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. So looking at the time, have maybe 20 minutes left. I would, and leaving some time for audience questions as well. I would maybe like to ask for you to share maybe a challenging situation, maybe from the technical perspective, and how you overcome it.
I guess I can go first. So, when you're thinking about building a full end-to-end cashierless store, right? One of the biggest challenges is how do you get a product catalog for detection of those products, right? And there's several ways people approach it, right? There's a pure computer vision approach. There's with sensors on the shelves. There's a lot of ways to do it. But the biggest problem starting out is that you have zero data. There's no data set to start out if you're just starting this project for your company. So one of the things we did, we took a two-pronged approach. One was we scraped data, right, from Google Images, other places, and pulled it out and did some segmentation and actually oriented those segmented images in random backgrounds to help with our detection and resize them. And the second thing we did is we used synthetic data. So we worked with a company to generate large numbers and samples of synthetic data. And actually there was a question about the AI fairness and equitability. And one of the things we did in partnership with that company was made sure our models worked for all types of people, right? All skin tones, all heights. It was generalizable enough so that our detection never failed, even though in our test set, our lab is very homogeneous. I'll be honest with you in terms of diversity, right? We have a very typical, group of males in the lab, and we do what we can to improve our diversity, but it's challenging in terms of who we're testing this on when we're building these products. And so using that synthetic data allowed us to build a system that both could detect a variety of products, but also worked for a variety of people.
Just out of curiosity, wasn't our friends from Unity that did a presentation earlier today?
No, it's a startup company, AI Reverie, that we worked with. They're very good.
I think that data availability is generally such a hot topic, and it's also one that is always present when we talk about small versus large companies, and some companies that have very easy access to data and how that skews the market in terms of both the kind of data we look at, also kinds of problem we solve with that data, but also ability for smaller companies to enter that market and really kind of create meaningful solutions. So Snackable hasn't been an exception to that. So we've done a lot of things to get around the cold start problem, looking for comparable data sets, using some unsupervised approaches to put a first version or a product into the market to test with, and then also using a lot of human annotation and finding kind of creative ways for us to be able to generate enough data to meaningfully work with it. And of course, with startups, what always helps is finding that early partner or early partners that you can collaborate with and start being a development partner for, so that you can get access to that customer's data, help them with a solution, but also in the process, like significantly improve your own models.
Perhaps Victor?
Yeah.
To share.
So talking about data, we maybe have the other problem. We have a lot of data, so we need to be careful in what we are doing with it, and not being too creepy, if that makes sense. We need to, be ethical and put ourselves into the, into the skin of our customers and think, would I be happy if I'm getting this offer because I was buying this or buying that. and this is sometimes a little bit difficult to make decisions because, or even when you are doing the model, you don't know if you are going to be creepy or not, because things, you don't realize and then they happen. So this is a little bit our challenge with data. We have plenty of data and we could be doing a lot of things, but we try to be really, we want to be useful for our customers and not make them feel bad or weird with what we do for them.
Have you actually tried to measure this somehow? Is it measurable at all, you think?
We haven't gone that far yet. We are just, doing some base into the business and starting doing the personalization in a different way and see how far we can get. So what we tend to do is, like, if we think that it's potentially a risky model, we just don't do it. And then maybe in the future, once we are a little more developed with all the infrastructure, then we may think about, try to measure if this happens. Obviously, this never happened to us, but our customers can contact us, send us messages on Twitter or on our website. So if we are doing something really bad, we can analyze these comments and see if we are doing something wrong. But so far, I would say that we haven't seen anything.
So for us, one of the challenges that we have is the getting like ML ops, and not to repeat ourselves. There are several projects and use the same data, and each of them create their own data. That is something to be optimized, and as well as there are multiple data science products, and again, coming from the customer as opposed to what am I trying to predict? Coming from the customer, we need to think about all different data products. We need to stay on message, as opposed to, for example, marketing might be, when you're on Facebook, we say you are buying a fridge, right? So you click on that link to Home Depot. When you jump to Home Depot, now we try to sell you mouth. That is just confusing. So there should be a coordination between multiple teams. And often when the companies are big, we have different data science team, and each they're doing their own thing. And coming from customer perspective, it's important that they see the same message. You're going to sell me a fridge or you're going to sell me a mouse watch. Pick one.
Do you also have? Since you're in a much larger company, I guess, is there also a centralized team taking care of stuff like data governance and so on, or is that kind of left to the individual teams?
There is, and being traditional, starting from traditional retailer, that function live more with the retail store, but online get added later. So I think it's kind of slow progression toward online. But as you can imagine, regulation for data in store is different from like privacy issue and all that stuff that we're facing online. So it's a work in progress to to get that data governance that is cohesive and consistent and makes sense for all channels.
I had maybe a slightly more technical question regarding model degradation over time. Can you maybe share your experiences there? I should say maybe model performance degradation.
We had a voice model, a search model that we had in production for a while. It was two things. One was the actual search, right, using terms for different products we had. The other was the voice part of it that would ingest, someone's vocal, data and search for them as part of our app. And I think one thing we saw over time is search kept having to be updated and has to be updated regularly based on our product SKU, right, mix. So based on how descriptions for each of the products are, it really matters, because what we learned is people don't ask for, I want Hawaiian Punch Gatorade. They say, I want red Gatorade. They don't say, I want a specific type of chocolate. They say, I want Hershey's, right? They want to be able to recognize the product without having to have the specific relevant semantic information you may have inside of the phrase description of that product. And so that took quite a bit of work to keep up and keep fresh.
I mean, for us, it's a similar situation. We deal with natural language processing. We take this, reams of recorded content and we try to understand its structure and understand what's meaningful, what's insightful. And the world changes. I mean, 14 months ago, most of us wouldn't have heard of COVID and all that related vocabulary. So that's just one example. Just be able to constantly update that corpus of data and refresh it to make sure that you're not making mistakes. And also, given that kind of a Cambrian explosion of content that happened along with the pandemic, now we do everything online. So it's webinars, it's, corporate communications, product introduction, sales training. So once you have perfected your model with one type of content, kind of start putting more into the mix and you realize that you actually have to kind of really start branching out and starting to get a little bit more specific around the different content types. So perhaps it's not necessarily degradation, but it's just a commentary on how data changes all the time and the world changes all the time. So keeping up with that, I think, is a constant challenge, at least in our field.
Yeah, in my field, recommendation, performance, when we train a model, let's say we, I stick with the chandelier, example again, similar chandelier, we get people to, explore more, right? But, so within training data, that's what we do. So we in a bubble of what we create for our training, But when we roll that out, there are many other factors that come into like how the model going to perform. Where would that show up on the page? At the top part, at the bottom part, right? There are other recommendations that show up or advertisements show up as well. You're competing with your fellow recommendation, and that, your coworker are building. And, which is fine. That's what we want for the customer, but it really affects your model performance. And, typically if you're at the bottom, you're not going to do very well. That's just how, regardless how awesome your model is, that's just how it is. And another, so need to take that into consideration. And in terms of A/B testing, A/B testing eventually, so we really try hard to get the fair, A/B testing result. And we can, if we have this model, you move it up, mean you're gonna do pretty good. Just not because your model is doing better, it's just because you get a better real estate on the page. But often it comes at a cost of other models who get moved down, right? So I have to take that into consideration of what's considered perform well. If you have a cannibalizing going on, that your model doing well, but at the cost of other projects doing poorly, then that has to be adjusted in terms of like what is considered performance for your model.
Makes sense. We're actually already, I'm sorry, we're over time. I thought we had another 10 minutes. So I think we have a question. We can maybe answer that offline in the chat. On behalf of the organizers, I had just a couple of announcements. So first of all, thank you very much to the panelists for the very interesting discussion.